All right, everyone. So we are back with the next part of the problems with the Pokemon Journey series. Now, there's a lot of subjects in this video today. We're going to have to make sure we cover it all. But the first major thing that I think we have an issue with is Team Rocket. The fact that it is the only evil organization left in the entire world, and they have failed to acknowledge it. So here's the thing. What happened to the admins other than, Butch and Cassidy? We got the episodes where they decided that they wanted to go and start off their own businesses, but they had all of these other people from the movies, Annie and Oakley, that they could have made canon, could have given backstories to. Even the admins from the games that never really got any love. It's really sad that the last team standing has been just turned into a shadow of its former self. But you know what? There's a person that I know that may have some interesting thoughts on this subject.
Hey Ronan, thank you for having me. Yes, I have some rather strong thoughts when it comes to Team Rocket and their handling in Journeys. They are acknowledged as the only evil team left standing, which feels like a massive missed opportunity in a series that prides itself on covering the entire world. There are so many interesting characters left out there. Like, for example, we have the Galactic Admins, who were briefly touched in the Legends Arceus special, yet generally, as you said, Team Rocket are the only ones acknowledged. And what even is done with Team Rocket?
Well, that's a good point. Team Rocket really doesn't have anything done with them. I mean, let's face it, the actual team itself, they don't really ever mention it. I mean, we have Giovanni's assistant, which, has she just become the leader of Team Rocket? What's the deal with her? She's the only one that ever really makes an appearance outside of Jesse and James, which in reality is kind of sad. Like I mentioned in my last video, Gio should have some feelings after what happened in Unova, especially to Ash. And now he has a regional champion that he should have a personal beef with in his home region. Why is this not touched on?
Absolutely. As you said, last time Giovanni made an in-person appearance, it was early in Journeys. He's been largely ignored, with even Matori, who had previously been the face of Team Rocket in Sun and Moon and X and Y, largely going unnoticed, leaving only Jesse, James, and Meowth kind of function as a cell almost outside the evil team. They seem to have no real motive or plan, largely spending time hanging around in their base, doing nothing. For example, we have those 3 side story episodes, such as the one where Meowth gets a cold, or dare I even speak of the dreaded Shootle Race episode. There seems to be no real point to even having them as characters anymore. These days, they barely do anything. Even some of their own most distinct qualities, like their bonds with their Pokemon, are being largely ignored in terms of the Gacha machine, with the only known Pokemon they've caught that I'm aware of being their Morpeko, which has no real bond with the team other than being a nuisance to them. In the past, Jesse and James cared deeply for their Pokemon. Look at a Poached Ego, where they heartbrokenly released Arbok and Weezing. Even their Sun and Moon teams, they cared enough about to put their own well-being over the needs of Team Rocket. Yet here, their Pokemon are treated, or their Pokemon singular, is treated with such disrespect and contempt. It hardly feels like Jesse and James are even themselves anymore.
You make a good point. And the reason why I say that is because over the years, Jesse and James has had a lot of variety of different Pokemon. And the sad part is this harkens back to my previous video. The name Journeys is in the title. Why couldn't we have gotten an episode where those two could have ran into Arbok and Weezing? I mean, think about the sentimental feeling. I know that they're supposed to be the bad guys, but the problem is we love them just as much as we love the main characters. And think about how heart-wrenching it would have been just to get even one episode to where they're in Hoenn, and instead of, they decide to use the Pokemon Gumball machine for the next big plan, they decide that, we're going to throw in Arbok and Weezing here. We're going to explore what's actually happened to them since they were released in the Hoenn region. Remember, the Hoenn region was not a native region to them. So technically, Jesse and James's Arbok and Weezing, they weren't at home when they first got there. So there would have been a lot of struggle for those two individually, even though they were the superior evolutions. They had no idea about the terrain. And if you think about it in the terms of animals, when you take an animal from one area and you put it into a completely new area, they could very often not make it. And it does happen a lot more than often. So just like I said with Ash, let us know that they're okay. Jesse and James didn't want to release them. It was very obvious that they wanted to get them back, but we never follow up with them again.
Oh, absolutely. I could imagine an episode so easily where they return to Hoenn and see a colony of Arbok and Weezing, possibly with a little Ekans and coughing to show that Arbok and Weezing are happy in their new lives. Some of the best episodes have been Team Rocket-centric. We have Go West Young Meowth, a poached ego which we have referenced, and even though I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, the episode where Jessie treats Mimikyu's costume after it has been damaged. These people clearly care about their Pokemon, and through them, we come to love these characters, yet so little is done with them at this point. They don't connect with their Pokemon, they don't reference their prior ones. We saw at the end of Black and White and X and Y that Jesse and James gave their Pokemon over to Giovanni, meaning they should be in Kanto and possibly be used for rotations. Journeys is so heavily based on callbacks that it seems like a massive missed opportunity to not use them. We have so many other characters coming back, so why not, as you said, Arbok and Weezing? Why not Marini and Mimikyu? It would give these characters who we've known for so long something to do and a plot rather than to be more than side stories and relics of what now seems to be a bit of a bygone era.
You know, you make a good point. And I did have a thought about that too, because, you know, there's one region they decided to focus on in particular in the later half of Journeys because a certain set of games were released around that time. And the region I'm talking about is Diamond and Pearl, the Sinnoh region. Now, if I recall correctly, there was a certain Pokemon that James had a bond with that he ended up giving up so it could become stronger. Anybody else remember that name? How about you, Pickle? Do you remember that name?
Oh, it went with a gym leader, if I recall correctly. It was a touching scene, and I even vaguely recall a promise that one day James would come back for it. What is that name? I feel like it starts with a C. No, not Carnivine, not Coughing. Oh, Cacnea! James's Cacnea from AG. The lovable little spike ball who kept hugging him. It would have been a prime example to see how Cacnea is doing with Gardenia, and perhaps even bring it into the rotation. But alas, as we're here to discuss, this is one of the many problems with Journeys.
You know, that's a good point. And as much as I think we could talk about Team Rocket and the follies of it, I think what it comes down to at the end of the day is they really are the only evil team left. They didn't really give any favorable time to the evil organization of Galar because they just, you know, sped run the darkest day. But at the end of the day, Team Rocket is a multi-regional threat, and it should have been treated like one. It would have been okay for Giovanni to have some sort of master plan here, especially since how they didn't really set too much of the adventure in Galar. So let Giovanni explore the world. There are tons of other legendaries that he would want to take advantage of, just like he did in the Black and White generation. And the fact that they didn't let him do really anything in the season that he really had the opportunity to is sad. And I don't think that it's fair that they just allow Jesse and James to become the main characters when they're not really even used for anything aside from gags. At one point, they were, you know, a credible threat. Why not put them back to that status? Allow Ash to be the regional champion that he is.
Absolutely. The Black and White incarnation of Jesse and James is one of my personal favorites, because it clearly set them up with their own side plot. Even if they weren't necessarily appearing with Ash in every episode, they had a function, and that stands in almost laughable contrast to how they're used in Journeys. At this point, they truly achieve nothing. They appear briefly more as filler than as anything of substance. And the few examples where it looks like they're going to return to their old ways of relevance, it turns out to be a fake out. such as the example of the episode largely heralded as their potential swan song, only to be about Butch and Cassidy, characters who had not appeared for over 900 episodes, and somehow even they're given more respect than our beloved Team Rocket trio. Think about it. Jesse, James, and Meowth are responsible for 43 of the Pokemon Ash has caught over the time. They're his most prominent battle opponents, yet now what are they? What purpose do they serve? Are they even necessary, or is it just an example of keeping them around because it's tradition at this point?
You know, you have a really good point here, but unfortunately, I feel like we've spent way too much time on this subject, and we still got a lot to talk about. So why don't we get to the next point in this discussion? And I know that this is going to be one that Mr. PICKLED DILL is all too passionate about, and that's the subject of this season's traveling companion for Ash. Go.
Oh, go. Where to begin? Well, I suppose I'll start with some slight appeasement. I think that Go, at his core, has the traits of an interesting character, and his bond with Ash is one of the better ones with a traveling companion. However, this only makes my gripe with him all the sadder, and it's his execution. Go is mismanaged almost from the beginning. Initially, his goal about following Mew, that's quite interesting, that's unique. And then he rapidly changes to catching all Pokemon. That's alright, though I do have issues with how that is handled. Go never faces any adversity during that time. He merely throws his ball and succeeds. Take that in contrast to Ash, who catches at most 10 Pokemon a region, builds up deep relationships with them so that they're established characters just as much as any other traveling companion. For Go, they're treated more like collectibles, with the only ones who get any form of personality being his starters.
That is a very compelling argument. And there's one thing that always bugged me about Go. The fact that he can really catch anything he sets his sights on. And case in point is Eternatus. He caught it into a ball and then just left it behind. And for someone who's as obsessed with Mew that he is, and believes that in order to understand Mew, he has to capture all Pokemon, I think that this is a huge fault in the development of him. And the reason why is because I talked about it randomly according to one of my comments on the last video. The true dragon from Unova. You see, if Mew truly houses all of the DNA of every Pokemon in the Pokemon world, then this mythical creature would house the DNA of the true dragon. Why can't we use this in some way to tie back to Unova and possibly compare Eternatus with Zekrom, Reshiram, and Kyurem? I think that it's way too much of a coincidence that those three came from a meteorite that fell from the sky, and Eternatus did too. And all of them share the dragon typing. It doesn't make sense to me that they could be considered of a separate entity. I think that at some point, those four may have been one in the past, which makes the argument, if they could have been, how many more undiscovered legendary dragons that have a different typing than those four could be left in the Pokemon world?
Wow, I didn't even think of that. That would be such a fascinating plot point to explore, especially in a series that is all about globetrotting. There truly would be no better place to do it. Unfortunately, Go simply catches Eternatus, and that's all that's said, much like the Macrocosmos arc in Chairman Rose that's just swept under the rug after the first season. And unfortunately, that isn't the only legendary who is mishandled in Journeys. Go's capture of Suicune is, to say the least, odd. He catches it, then allows it to roam, making the whole act of catching it largely unnecessary when he simply could have helped it. That's how Ash would have handled it. And then there is Mew itself, as you mentioned, the crux of Go's goal. At least to me, it seems that they did not know how to handle this, and so introduced Project Mew far too late into the story. Roughly 60 episodes in, it felt somewhat arbitrary and odd, and even the way Go responds to it speaks to a mismanaging of his core character traits. Go, the person whose whole dream is to capture Mew, when offered a place in a group all designed to find Mew, do you remember what his reaction is?
You know, Now that you mention it, I don't. I have a hard time really picturing anything from Go. And that is one of the problems I see. There isn't really anything memorable about what he does. It started off as such a good concept, but it falls flat the farther and farther we get into the entire series, which is really sad because, like you said, Pickle, he had a really, really good and unique concept in the beginning, but as the series goes on, it loses its luster. And the fact that he can just really throw a Pokeball at anything and catch it, it doesn't really work. That's not how Pokemon has been built over the last 25 years. It doesn't even work like that in the games. Yeah, sure, you have better catch rates with certain balls. But honestly, the whole, I'm just going to go to this part because the boat's leaving in 20 minutes and then I'm going to throw something at everything on the island until I have one of it. It doesn't really appease to me. And I don't imagine that it would appease to the larger audience at hand, which is really sad because in the past, Ash's traveling companions have had a lot better development than what he's had. They've had interesting goals for things that were exclusive to animes, but Go could be a goal that is set in the games, which, when you think about it, might be an interesting task, but it really wasn't in the grand scheme of things after you watch it executed.
You're absolutely right, and that brings something else to mind. The way Go is handled in terms of his goal, he never fails, he never grows. With Ash, one of the greatest lessons he ever learned was that when he fails, he should take something from it, he should grow. Even failure is a chance to get better. But Go never fails. He throws his ball, he succeeds. The closest he's ever come to failure is during the Articuno raid battle, where his own poor treatment of his teammates caused them to fail the mission. Yet even so, he was rewarded almost as much as the people who did their best and did the right thing. Go, in a sense, is treated with kid gloves, and that makes him tedious to watch, because when you see it's a Go episode, you know he's going to go to a place, catch a bunch of things without struggling, and then walk away smelling like roses. I don't know about you, but that doesn't make a very interesting protagonist. In contrast, we have Chris from the Pokemon Adventures manga. In her chapters, she, like Go, is a capture specialist whose dream is to catch every Pokemon, but following an encounter with a legendary, she goes through a slump where she loses her ability to capture and has to relearn and has to rethink her entire relationship with capturing and Pokemon. It is a fascinating storyline full of pathos that kept me, and I imagine many others, greatly engaged with Chris as a character. But can the same be said of Go? I think not. There's no substance to how he is portrayed and the way he achieves his goal. And when you look at the possibility that he may be replacing Ash as the protagonist moving forward, I struggle to think how the series could progress with a character who is just almost innately perfect. And that troubles me and honestly scares me, as I would hate to see a Pokemon anime that doesn't put a value in striving anymore. Personally, one of the things that always touched my heart and shaped me growing up with Pokemon is the importance of knowing that you may not be perfect, but if you do your best and you never give up on the dream, one day you can achieve it. Go, at least in my eyes, runs completely contrary to that, going, oh, I guess you can just succeed. And I worry, in a sense, for the lessons that teaches the generation growing up with Journeys in the same way that I grew up with the original series.
Well, with all that being said, it seems like Mr. Pickle is very passionate about Go. But you know what? He's not the only character that they introduced in Journeys that really was mishandled. And I think we should touch on these briefly before we move on to the next major subject. And the major one for me is Chloe. She was introduced very early on, and they didn't really do much with her until she got an Eevee. And now it's just like every other episode is just Chloe. Chloe, 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 Chloe. We're nearing the end of the Masters 8, and they keep breaking up every battle with 18,000 Chloe episodes in between each one. And it doesn't really make sense. Why are you waiting until now to develop his character? I understand that she couldn't really be a traveling companion for Ash and Go in the beginning, but she could have at least, taken a weekend journey with him. School's only 5 days a week, okay? Even in the Pokemon world, she has weekends off. which means that, Ash and Go traveling 7 days a week, because that's, literally what they do. That's their job as 10-year-olds, even though Chloe's 10-year-old, but we won't get into that. Anyway, that's literally what they do. It's perfectly believable that she could have taken a weekend trip with them. She doesn't have to catch anything, but allow her to grow as a person. What about your thoughts on this, Pickle?
I think you're really hitting the nail on the head in the fact that Chloe doesn't really get much development or even an identity of her own. In the beginning, she was introduced as another side character in the lab, much like Ren. You see him occasionally, but they're not expected to have any more development. But then, through reasons honestly beyond my comprehension, they decided to treat her like a traveling companion, and so they felt the need to give her a purpose as such. For that, they brought in Evie, and even this feels largely unoriginal. Ignoring the fact that we've had several companions in the past who've had Evies, her whole shtick is that she doesn't really know what she wants to do or be. I'd bring up a certain name, Serena. I think most people know her. She too had that same arc, except instead of dragging it out over several seasons, she used it to actually develop and eventually find a goal. With the recent Chloe episode, which as you said, broke up the Masters 8 for honestly no good reason, not just 1 week but 2, her goal ultimately became, I guess I don't know what my goal is and I'm okay with that. What an unsatisfying end to a character who honestly didn't need as much screen time as she got. And the sad thing is, with very minor tweaks, she could have been a very interesting companion. Evie, who honestly got more development than her, which is tragic, spent its episodes seeing new variations of itself and experimenting by acting similarly to them to see if that suited it. Chloe's in a similar boat. She's trying to find her path forward. Ash and Go frequently wind up visiting other vocations. There was the episode at the farm. There was the episode where they became police. There was the episode where they became electricians and plumbers. It would have been so natural to have Chloe try her hand at all of these, going, is this my dream? Then at least she would have had a function rather than just being there to disapprove of Ash and Go's adventures. It's honestly sad that I can't really tell you anything about Chloe as a person. Even her original role as Go's childhood best friend gets usurped by Horace or Tokyo if you're watching the subs, which truly makes her just a massive missed opportunity as a character. And it's for reasons just like these that I felt the need to try my own hand at Journey's rewrite. If you haven't seen it already, I highly recommend you check out my story, What If Pokemon Journeys Was Set in Galar, in which I tried to mitigate some of the more glaring flaws of Journeys, as well as put my own spin on the story. The link to that is in the iCard.
Well, everyone, that's going to conclude this part of the Problems with Journey series. Now, if you guys haven't already, head on over to Pickle Dill's channel, because he's going to have the other part of this discussion that me and him had together. And I promise you, if you were engaged with the stuff here, then you're definitely not going to want to miss that one. And I also want to take the time to thank Pickle Dill himself. Without him, I wouldn't have been able to make this part of the series possible. And it really shows that I'm not the only one that sees that there's problems with journeys. But anyway, you guys know the drill. If you liked the video, don't forget to drop a like and give us any thoughts you had in the comments. And don't forget to head over to Pickle Dill's channel, because there's definitely going to be a lot of things that you're going to want to see over there. But with all that being said, there's going to be one more part to the character arc, and that's going to be released in a couple of days, and that's going to be my take on Ash's Journeys team. But anyway, it's time to sign out the video the best way we know how, by thanking the sponsors, the patrons. Silverheart Soul, Robert, Vegito Gaming 78, Andrew McCartney, Holosif, Julian Rodriguez, Ruben Watson, Lord Explosion Murder, Assassin 139, Flyer 943, Shadow Dragon, Tavern Landlord, K McKnight, Kevin Atran, Drax, True Volt, Adrian Carr, Dino King, Dalen Silva, Fox King, Dalian Petit, Warren E. Taylor, Plus Ultraman, Megar, Mike Logan, Team Valor, Kendall Green, Earth Dragon, John Larson, Alex Horsey, Forbidden Super, and Dylan Nicholson. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you on Pickle Dill's channel.